Don't fuck people before you're married and have babies.
Sure.
Done.
That's great. We can say that and try to fight against, however many hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, but people will have sex and people will make babies.
And then they used to get married. The vast majority of people in this country with kids used to be married. The vast majority of people with kids in this country now are not married increasingly. That is obviously a societal change. Something changed. It wasn't human evolution.
But we can say that and try to fight against, however many hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. But
that is obviously a societal change. Something changed. It wasn't human evolution.
But do we think that shotgun marriages are, well, let's say this. Do we think that that's a reasonable direction that society would ever take? Or is this like...
Yes, it was the reasonable direction for nearly all of modern history.
But history moves in one direction, right?
Why?
Because of time?
I mean, people don't think that that's... In what way? In what way is that?
And I don't think we've ever regressed social standards back to like, oh, well, let's go 100 years back and do things that, used to exist before. I think
weird. The entire left right now is arguing that we regress social standards by rejecting Roe versus Wade. The notion that the arc of history constantly moves in one direction is belied by nearly all of the 20th century.
What do we mean by that?
I mean,
in terms of like women's rights, civil rights,
barbarism, communism, Nazism, all of that was a regression from what was happening at, for example, the beginning of the 19th century and the 20th century.
In what way?
Nazism and communism weren't a regression from what was going on in 1905?
These are, in terms of like communism being a regression, for instance, I'm not a communist, but like I'm not a communist, but like the industrialization of the Soviet Union happened under a communist society.
Bruh.
The industrialization of the Soviet Union happened under a communist society. The industrialization,
the murder of tens of millions of people.
Yeah,
I consider that a regression. A moral regression, which is what we are talking about now. Moral regression.
QED.
And you're suggesting that moral regression, I wouldn't term a return to traditional values a moral regression. You would, but your suggestion is that history only moves in one direction, and I'm suggesting that history does not only move in one direction; it tends to move actually back and forth.
Sure. History moves in one direction. I don't think that all of history moves in one direction. One quick thing, I guess, like, because we can say the reality of it and we can look at opinion polls. What if we look at like legislative accomplishments? Like Biden is working on a 50-50 divided Senate. Donald Trump had both houses of Congress and the Supreme Court and got like no major legislation passed.
I mean, yes, his Republican base was not in favor of mass spending on infrastructure, and neither am I.
Republicans don't ever pass signature legislation. It is antithetical to their worldview. What the fuck? Republicans don't run on legislation anymore, okay?